Sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Sexual reproduction in flowering plants involves the production of male and female gametes, which combine to form a zygote that develops into a seed. The male gamete is contained within pollen, which is produced by the anther of a flower's stamen, while the female gamete is contained in the ovule, which is located in the ovary at the base of the pistil. During pollination, pollen is transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower or to a compatible part of the same flower, where it germinates and produces a pollen tube that grows down the style to reach the ovule. The male gamete then travels through the pollen tube and fuses with the female gamete to form a zygote. The zygote undergoes mitotic cell division to form an embryo, which is enclosed within the seed. The ovary also develops into a fruit that protects and disperses the seeds. Sexual reproduction in flowering plants allows for genetic variation, which can help the offspring adapt to changing environmental conditions, and also allows for the creation of new plant varieties through selective breeding. Structure and functions of a flower. A flower is the reproductive structure of flowering plants' angiosperms, and is specialized for sexual reproduction. Here are the parts of a typical flower and their functions. 1. Sepals. These are leaf-like structures that protect the flower bud as it develops. 2. Petals. These are often brightly colored structures that attract pollinators like insects and birds to the flower. 3. Stamens. These are the male reproductive structures of the flower and consist of an anther and a filament. The anther produces the pollen, which contains the male gametes, and the filament supports the anther. 4. Pistil, also called a carpel. This is the female reproductive structure of the flower and consists of the stigma, style, and ovary. The stigma is where the pollen is deposited. The style connects the stigma to the ovary, and the ovary contains the ovules, which contain the female gametes. During sexual reproduction, pollen from the anther lands on the stigma and grows a pollen tube down the style to reach the ovule, where fertilization occurs. The resulting zygote develops into an embryo, which is enclosed within a seed. The ovary also develops into a fruit that protects and disperses the seeds. Overall, the structure of a flower is specialized for attracting pollinators, producing and receiving pollen, and protecting and developing the seeds, making it key to the survival and reproduction of flowering plants. Longitudinal section of a generalized dicotyledonous flower. A generalized dicotyledonous flower typically has the following parts, from the outermost whorl to the innermost whorl, in a longitudinal section. 1. Sepals. These are usually green in color and are the outermost part of the flower. They protect the flower bud before it opens. 2. Petals. These are the usually brightly colored part of the flower that serve to attract pollinators. 3. Stamens. These are male reproductive structures, each comprising a filament and an anther. The anthers produce and release pollen. 4. Carpels. These are the female reproductive structures, each comprising a stigma, style, and ovary. 5. Stigma. This is the receptive portion of the carpel where the pollen lands. 6. Style. This is the part of the carpel that connects the stigma to the ovary. 7. Ovary. This contains the ovules, which are the female gametes. During pollination, pollen from the anthers lands on the stigma, and a pollen tube grows through the style to reach the ovules within the ovary. Fertilization occurs, resulting in the development of seeds within the ovary. A generalized dicotyledonous flower may also have a receptacle, which is the part of the stem to which the flower is attached, and a pedicel, which is the stalk of an individual flower within an inflorescence. More details on parts of a flower. Calyx. The calyx is the outermost whorl of a flower, typically green in color and made up of sepals, which are usually small and leaf-like in appearance. The primary function of the calyx is to provide protection for the developing flower bud. In some cases, the calyx may also help to attract pollinators or aid in seed dispersal. The calyx can vary in shape and size depending on the type of flower, and it can be fused or unfused. In some species, the calyx may be modified into specialized structures, such as spines or hooks, for defense or attachment purposes. Overall, the calyx is an important part of the flower and has evolved to serve a variety of functions related to reproduction and survival. Corolla. The corolla is the second whorl of a flower, located inside the calyx and typically composed of petals. The primary function of the corolla is to attract pollinators, such as insects, birds, or bats, to the flower. Petals are often brightly colored, scented, or patterned to catch the attention of these animals. The number, size, shape, and color of the petals can vary greatly from species to species, and may even change over the course of the flower's development. In some cases, the corolla may play a role in protecting the reproductive structures of the flower, such as by forming a barrier against rain or wind. Overall, the corolla is an important part of a flower's reproductive strategy, contributing to the attraction of pollinators and ultimately aiding in the production of seeds. Androecium. Androecium is the third whorl of a flower, consisting of the male reproductive structures, called stamens. Each stamen typically consists of a filament and an anther. The anther is responsible for producing and releasing pollen, which contains the male gametes. The number and arrangement of stamens in the androecium can vary widely among different types of flowers, and can even differ within a single species. Flowers with multiple stamens are generally more efficient at producing and releasing large amounts of pollen, increasing the chance of successful pollination. The androecium plays a critical role in the reproduction of flowers, as it is responsible for producing and dispersing male gametes to the female reproductive structures of the flower or to other flowers for cross-fertilization. Gynoecium or pistil. Gynoecium or pistil is the fourth and innermost whorl of a flower, consisting of the female reproductive structures. The pistil typically consists of three main parts: the stigma, the style, and the ovary. The stigma is the receptive surface that receives pollen from the male reproductive structures. The style is a slender, elongated structure that connects the stigma to the ovary, allowing the pollen to travel down to reach the ovules inside the ovary. The ovary contains the ovules, which are the female gametes that, when fertilized by male gametes, develop into seeds. The number, size, shape, and arrangement of the pistils can vary widely among different types of flowers, ranging from a single pistil to many separate pistils. The gynoecium or pistil is a crucial part of the flower's reproductive system, responsible for receiving and fertilizing the male gametes, and producing the next generation of plants. Ovary. There are two types of ovaries, namely, an inferior ovary. It is the type of ovary that is situated below the attachment of other floral parts, such as the sepals, petals, and stamens. In an inferior ovary, the floral parts appear to attach to the top of the ovary or near the ovary's midpoint. The wall of the ovary surrounds the seeds to make a protective cover, and it develops into the fruit after fertilization occurs. B. Superior ovary. It is the type of ovary that is situated above the attachment of other floral parts. In a superior ovary, the floral parts appear to attach to the base of the ovary or on its sides. The wall of the ovary surrounds the seeds to form a protective cover, and it develops into the fruit after fertilization occurs. Superior ovaries are found in the majority of angiosperms or flowering plants. Terms used to describe different types of flowers. Complete flower. A complete flower is a type of flower that has all four floral organs: sepals, petals, stamens, and a pistil. The sepals are the leaf-like structures at the base of the flower that protect the developing bud. The petals are the colorful structures that attract pollinators to the flower. The stamens are the male reproductive organs that produce pollen, and the pistil is the female reproductive organ that contains the ovary, style, and stigma. A complete flower can be both perfect, containing both male and female reproductive organs, or imperfect, containing only one type of reproductive organ. Most angiosperms flowering plants produce complete flowers. Incomplete flower. An incomplete flower is a type of flower that lacks one or more of the four floral organs: sepals, petals, stamens, and pistils. For example, some incomplete flowers may have all four organs present, but one or more are poorly developed or non-functional. Other incomplete flowers may have only one or two types of organs present, such as a flower with only sepals and pistils, or only stamens and petals. Incomplete flowers can be perfect, containing both male and female reproductive organs, or imperfect, containing only one type of reproductive organ. Examples of plants that produce incomplete flowers include grasses, sedges, and some species of trees, such as oak and birch. Unisexual flower. A unisexual flower is a type of flower that contains only male or female reproductive organs, but not both. In other words, a unisexual flower is either a stamenate, male, flower or a pistillate female, flower. These flowers are also called imperfect flowers because they lack one of the four basic floral organs. Some plants produce only unisexual flowers, while others produce both unisexual and bisexual flowers. The plants that produce only unisexual flowers are called dioecious. while plants that produce both unisexual and bisexual flowers are called monoecious. Examples of plants that produce unisexual flowers include cucumber, squash, and willow trees. Bisexual flower. A bisexual flower is a type of flower that contains both male and female reproductive organs, stamens and pistils in the same flower. Bisexual flowers are also called perfect flowers because they have all four basic floral organs: sepals, petals, stamens, and pistils. In bisexual flowers, the stamens surround the pistil, making self-pollination possible. Bisexual flowers can also be pollinated by insects or other animals, which helps to increase genetic diversity. Most angiosperms flowering plants produce bisexual flowers, including roses, lilies, sunflowers, and many others. Bisexual flowers are sometimes also referred to as hermaphroditic flowers. Staminate flower. A staminate flower is a male flower that has only male reproductive organs, namely stamens. Stamens consist of anthers and filaments that produce and support pollen grains respectively. Staminate flowers do not have a pistil or a functional ovary, and therefore, are incapable of producing seeds or fruit. They release pollen grains into the air, which is then carried by insects, wind, or other means to the pistillate female flowers for fertilization. Most plants that produce staminate flowers also have pistillate flowers, and these plants are called dioecious. Examples of plants that produce staminate flowers are birch, oak, hazel, and some species of grasses. Pistillate flower. A pistillate flower is a female flower that has only female reproductive organs, namely the pistil. The pistil consists of three parts: the stigma, style, and ovary. The stigma is a sticky upper surface that receives pollen grains. The style, which is the tubular structure leading from the stigma to the ovary, allows the pollen tube to grow down to the ovary for fertilization. The ovary contains one or more ovules that develop into seeds after fertilization. Pistillate flowers do not have stamens or anthers, and they are incapable of producing pollen. They must be fertilized by the pollen produced by the staminate, male, flowers or another plant of the same species. Most plants that produce pistillate flowers have staminate flowers on the same plant, and these plants are called monoecious. Examples of plants that produce pistillate flowers are corn, cucumber, tomato, and watermelon. Monoecious plant. A monoecious plant is a type of plant that has both male and female flowers on the same individual plant. These plants produce two types of flowers: staminate, male, and pistillate female flowers, and the flowers are usually located on different parts of the plant. Monoecious plants are also known as single houses. They are able to self-pollinate because of the presence of both types of flowers, but they can also be cross-pollinated by insect pollinators or wind. Examples of monoecious plants include corn, oak, and cucumbers. Dioecious plant. A dioecious plant is a type of plant that has either male or female flowers on a single individual plant. This means that dioecious plants only have one type of flower on each individual plant, either staminate, male, or pistillate female flowers. Therefore, in order for a dioecious plant to produce seeds, it must have both male and female plants growing in close proximity to each other in order for pollination to occur. Dioecious plants are also known as double houses. Examples of dioecious plants include many species of trees, such as willows, poplars, and some oak trees, hollies, and asparagus. Some species of plants can exhibit both monoecious and dioecious characteristics, depending on environmental conditions. Actinomorphic flower. An actinomorphic flower, also called a radial flower or regular flower, is a flower that has radial symmetry, which means that it can be divided into symmetrical halves in multiple planes. Actinomorphic flowers typically have multiple, identical parts arranged in concentric circles, such as petals, sepals, and stamens, which all radiate out from the center of the flower. This arrangement allows for multiple points of attachment for pollinators, such as bees or butterflies, to land and access the flower's nectar and pollen. Examples of plants with actinomorphic flowers include daisies, roses, lilies, and morning glories. In contrast, plants with asymmetrical, irregular, or zygomorphic flowers have parts that are not identical, and typically have bilateral symmetry instead of radial symmetry. Zygomorphic flower. A zygomorphic flower, also called an irregular flower, is a flower that has bilateral symmetry. This means that the flower can be divided into two symmetrical halves in only one plane. Zygomorphic flowers usually have a distinct and often complex shape, as the petals, sepals and other parts are arranged unequally on one side compared to the other. This often serves as an adaptation to attract specific pollinators, such as bees or butterflies, that are able to manipulate the flower in a specific way to access nectar and pollen. Examples of plants with zygomorphic flowers include snapdragons, orchids, pea plants, and many members of the mint family. The shape and specialized structure of these flowers help to ensure that pollination occurs more efficiently and accurately by specific pollinators, as they often need to land on specific portions of the flower in order to access its rewards, such as nectar or pollen. Revision exercise. 1. Distinguish between A. Monoecious and dioecious. B. Inferior and superior ovary. C. Complete and incomplete flower. D. Staminate and pistillate flower. A. Monoecious plants have both male and female flowers on the same individual plant, whereas dioecious plants have either male or female flowers on separate individual plants. B. A superior ovary is an ovary that is located above the attachment point of the other flower parts, sepals, petals, and stamens, whereas an inferior ovary is an ovary that is below the attachment point of these flower parts. C. A complete flower has all four main floral organs, sepals, petals, stamens, and pistils, while an incomplete flower is missing at least one of these organs. D. The staminate flower is the male flower part that produces pollen, while the pistillate flower is the female flower part that contains the ovules which can become seeds after pollination. 2. Name the male and female parts of a flower. The male part of a flower is called the stamen, which consists of anthers and filaments. The anthers produce and release pollen, which contains the male reproductive cells. The female part of a flower is called the pistil or carpel, which includes the stigma, style, and ovary. The stigma is the female reproductive structure that receives pollen, while the ovary contains the ovules, female reproductive cells, which can become seeds after pollination. The style is the structure that connects the stigma and ovary.